Hello. Welcome to our session. And first of all, you all are troopers. I know it's late in the day and also on the second to last day of the event. So thank you so much for being here. This is our session, OTel Me, How to Get My Open Source Community Taken Seriously. Lessons learned as OTel maintainers.
Well, let's get started. So my name is Adriana Villela. I am a CNCF ambassador, blogger, podcaster, and one of the maintainers of the OTel End User SIG, alongside Reese and Dan, who is around KubeCon, but not here today.
He's onboarding at his new company.
Yes. And yeah, by day I'm a principal developer advocate at Dynatrace, spending most of my time in the land of OTel and observability. And by night, I like to climb walls. I like to visit local bouldering gyms whenever I visit a different city. So I checked out a couple of different ones here in London, which has been awesome. And also, I love capybaras because they make me happy.
I am Reese Lee. I'm a senior developer relations engineer at New Relic, and as Adriana mentioned, I co-maintain the End User SIG along with Dan Gomez Blanco, who is, as I mentioned, onboarding at his new company. And I guess by night I started training Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu like about a year ago, and I love it. So if anyone else here does it and wants to talk about it, please find me. Okay, so here's what we have for you today. Okay, so we'll start by talking a little bit about the OpenTelemetry project. How many of you here are familiar with OpenTelemetry? Almost everybody, or if not everybody. Awesome. Okay, so we'll just kind of introduce the project a little bit, and then we'll talk about the end user SIG story, which is what we are so excited to share. And we'll talk about implementation, so like what we did within the SIG, what has worked, and what maybe hasn't worked so well. And then finally, we'll finish up with strategies that you can take to your communities today and implement.
Okay, well, let's start off with the OpenTelemetry project. So OTel was born in 2019 after merging Open Census, which was from Google, and Open Tracing, which was CNCF, because back then everyone and their uncle wanted to have their own instrumentation framework, and Open Tracing, Open Census were attempting to standardize that, but what better way to standardize than to have a single standard? So OpenTelemetry was born, a CNCF project, which allowed us to standardize our instrumentation for traces, logs, and metrics, but also correlate all three, which is not necessarily something that was happening in the industry. And OTel, I mean, folks here are familiar with OTel, but briefly, it's a vendor-neutral open source standard that is used to generate, collect, and export telemetry data to wherever accepts it. So the things I think that are really nice about the OTel community, so it was, I believe, modeled after the Kubernetes community. And I think one of the things that OTel and Kubernetes have in common is that there isn't a single dominant vendor around. And I think that's what really makes this such a special community. I mean, Reese and I work for competitors, but I don't see her as my competitor. Like, we're buddies. We do talks all over the globe. So it's like super awesome. So, you know, it's such a supportive community. We have, you know, basically we have the backing of all the major observability vendors. And without that backing, we probably wouldn't be able to say that we are the standard for collecting and generating telemetry data. So that makes a huge, huge difference. It's vendor neutral by design, with the idea that, like, we're all, you know, if you work for a vendor, we're all ingesting the same data, but what differentiates one vendor from another is what they do with your data in the end. It's an egalitarian community, so there are no snowflakes allowed and no egos in the room, and I think that's really important. You know, whenever someone, I remember, I think we were writing a blog post and we're like, oh, we want to show how like something shows up in the back end, the observability vendor that I was working for and the observability vendor that Reese was working for, and they're like, well, you know, it would be really good if you just showed like a vendor neutral, like open source solution. We're like, yeah, that's super cool. We're okay with that. And I think that's really nice. Like, first of all, like, it was said to us really nicely, and secondly, yeah, we don't want to like make one vendor stand out over the others. And I think the other thing that's really important is it's a thoughtful community. Members treat each other with kindness and respect. When I first submitted my first PR, now I've been in tech for 25 years. I've only been in open source for the last 3 years. And the first time I submitted my first PR to OTel, and that was my first open source project, I was so scared. I'm like, oh my God, people are gonna think I'm an imposter and they're gonna hate my work, blah, blah. And then like the comments were so thoughtful and nice, and like they were constructive. So because of that, I'm like, hey, this is a legit good community and I wanna keep contributing to it. So next we're going to talk about the OTel End User SIG story.
Thank you, Adriana. And yeah, I want to echo what she has said about it. When I first started, I was trying to figure out where I could best contribute. I hopped into a bunch of different SIG meetings, and everyone was just like, oh, hi, welcome. Thank you for being here. And I was like, oh, wow. So you just heard an abbreviated version of how OpenTelemetry came to be, and how kind of bits and pieces of the community started forming together. So we have a governance committee, which is made up of members who are elected, a technical committee, and both of those oversee the project as a whole. We also have special interest groups, or SIGs, for just about every component of the project, as well as working groups, which are centered around temporary projects, so to speak. The main distinction between a SIG and a working group is the permanence. So we'll get into that a little bit more in a second, because we originally started out as a working group. So one thing that we noticed that was missing, this was 2021, a couple years after the project had kind of been around for a little bit. So my manager at the time, Shar Creedon, she was working with people like Alolita Sharma, Ted Young. Henrik actually was involved quite a bit too at the beginning. And one of the things that they noticed was there wasn't a dedicated space for end users. And because it was still in its infancy, documentation was still a huge work in progress. There wasn't dedicated resources for end users to be able to go and ask hey, how do we do this? How can we do that? What even is OpenTelemetry? And kind of along those lines. So Shar, along with some of the people that I mentioned and others as well, put together a proposal for the end user working group. And it was proposed and accepted, obviously. And eventually, we started working together to figure out, okay, what are end users needing right now that we can help provide? So a lot of it was having a space for end users to get together and be able to talk about, hey, what have you done? I'm trying to do this. Has anyone else tried this? And what have you learned from it? So this is a question we are still answering, because end users' needs evolve, and they're going to continue to evolve, especially as the project itself evolves. And of course, on the stage, it's a lot of very early adopters. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next section as well. So through the years, let's see, the working group was formed in 2021. And over time, as we started doing more of these events and activities and putting together resources for end users, we realized, hey, this is no longer a temporary issue. I don't know if the issue is the right word for it, but we recognize that, hey, this needs to be a bit more of a permanent solution and resource. And so in between, we put forth a request to convert the SIG from end user working group to SIG. And it was a process that luckily had the blessing of the governance committee. So we were able to form as a SIG, and now we have approvers, chargers, approvers, and maintainers. Okay, so along with that, we got our own GitHub repo, we got our own Kanban board, and I think converting from a working group to a SIG also kind of gave us more authority, or made us more official.
Yeah,
which I think really helped,
agree.
and we've been able to get more contributors as a result, so that was very exciting for us. Okay, so I think we're going to talk about that in the implementation project section, more about how we've evolved, because that's the exciting part. Okay. Oh, yes. So 2022, the last 2 years, we tried many different things. And right now, we're still trying many different things. As I said, end users' needs are still evolving, so it's a project. Okay, so this is pretty cool. These are some of the things that we have done and what we're currently doing. And the first thing, so one of the first things we started putting together was an end user discussion group. And this was actually based off a suggestion from an early adopter of OpenTelemetry. He was part of another open source project where they had these end user discussion groups. So it was a dedicated time for end users to come together and talk about, hey, what are you doing? How are you doing this? And so we kind of followed the format pretty closely. We had an agile coffee format, which is where everything is time boxed neatly to make sure like everything on the agenda gets a set amount of time. So for instance, like 15 minutes per topic or whatever works for you. And yeah, it was a forum for end users to ask questions. We also added added at least 1 or 2 OTel maintainers to kind of give guidance to some of the more technical questions or more obscure questions that we ourselves were not best able to answer. And we actually had at one point this activity for all the regions, so America, Europe, and APJ. Eventually, it became a little bit too much to handle across all different time zones. And so we have actually deprecated this particular activity in favor of some of the other ones that we're going to talk about next. So one of the ones we had at the beginning as well, they used to be called the Q&A/interview/feedback sessions. And now we just shortened it to OTel Me sessions. So these are where we have a schedule where we'll book a time with an end user organization. And we ask a set of standard questions like, tell us about your tech stack. When did you get started with OpenTelemetry? Like how and why? Like, right? Why OpenTelemetry? Like, why did your organization decide, hey, this is what we want to do? And we also, depending on their specific implementation of OpenTelemetry in their org, we'll also ask specific questions on like, how was this exactly done? And then another goal of these is to get feedback from the end user so we could siphon it back to the maintainers and contributors and help improve the project as a whole. And yeah, so these have also evolved. They used to be just like Zoom meetings, you know, the traditional format, very dry. And we've recently, with the help of Henrik Rexed from Dynatrace, been able to up the production value so they look more exciting. Oh, I should have put a screenshot, but that's okay.
Also, Reese started adding some really cool animations to the beginning of our live stream, so we've really zhuzhed it up.
Thank you. It's just something fun, and if you have questions about it, I'm very happy to talk more about that specifically. But yeah, we live stream these. I think we try to do them once a month. It depends, of course, like on scheduling, so it may not always be once a month, but we make sure that these are public and viewers are able to learn from what other organizations have already done. Yes, and I don't know, I'll pause there. Okay, so another one we've been doing since the beginning is something called OpenTelemetry in practice. And these are in a more meetup style format. We usually invite whoever's interested to, it could be an end user, it could be a contributor, to come on and present something about OpenTelemetry. Could be something about tracing. We've had some interesting sessions, although I'm blanking right now.
We had one where we've had a couple where it was like observability companies that were like implementing OTel internally. So those were cool.
Yes, and we also
like
had
Jacob Aronoff when he was at Lightstep. He
Yes.
came and talked about how they use
target
OTel.
allocator.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. He talked about the target allocator. Yeah, so it's like really cool use cases. And the other thing too that I was going to say, it's like if you want to test out your OTel talk, guinea pig us. Like,
Oh, yeah, yeah. We try to encourage, people who are not as familiar with the stage, but they want to present a talk. Feel free to hit us up, and we are happy to give you a forum to try it out yourself. And again, these are live streams, and we make the recording available, so you can also be enabled on all the things that these people are showing. And then surveys.
okay, so surveys, basically we, I think it was like last KubeCon, no, sorry, yeah, last KubeCon EU, we got approached by Jurasi from the OTel Collector SIG saying, hey, it'd be really cool if you guys could help us out to put out a survey on the OTel Collector so that we can use it to drive what the roadmap of the collector is going to be in the next year. So we're like, oh, this is awesome. So we basically worked with them to craft the survey. We basically, we promoted it on the OTel socials, and then we even made sure that we even held a session, like basically a panel, like a live stream panel, where some collector end users could actually meet live with a maintainer to talk about some of their feedback around the OTel Collector. And the cool thing about this is that once that happened, then we had other SIGs reach out to us and say, hey, can we work with you to put out a survey? And so I think one of our struggles actually originally with the end user SIG was one of our mandates was to bring the feedback of the end user community back to the maintainers. And these surveys are such a great way to do that because now we have like concrete results that we can share back with the maintainers. So we have the survey results, and then after the survey is closed, then we make sure that the results are shared with the SIG that put out the survey, and then also make sure that they're shared out with the maintainers. And all of this stuff is available publicly on our GitHub repo. So we have all the survey results on our GitHub repo, and then we also work with the SIGs to write a blog post summarizing the survey results. So we have that information publicly available for the SIGs to use that to really help drive improvement across the org. So actually the surveys got a shout out at the OTel project updates yesterday, so pretty exciting. And I think the one that just wrapped up was the contributor experience survey. So we are looking forward to helping facilitate more surveys in the coming year. So hit us up if you're part of the OTel community and want a survey put out. We're going to start putting together a schedule of surveys as well, because we realized that there's a lot of demand for surveys, and we're like, we need actually a more formalized process for handling the surveys. So making sure that we have a process for folks to approach us around running the surveys, and then making sure we have a schedule so we don't have surveys overlapping with each other, because we also don't want survey fatigue. So that's been a bit of a challenge with the surveys that we're working through right now. We've also had a couple of ad hoc sessions. So sometimes, we can't get someone for OTel Me or OTel in practice. And we're like, you know what? We don't want to be out of sight, out of mind. We want to make sure that we continue to engage with the community in one way or another. So we'll have these ad hoc sessions. We've had earlier in the year a session where we got people together who are part of the OTel community, who have experience in writing CFPs or have been on program committees and have been successful in getting their talks accepted. We held a live stream to talk about tips and tricks for getting your CFPs accepted. So having those types of community connections. We've also had roundtables with observability experts as part of this as well. And the important thing here is that this is an opportunity for us to continue to engage with contributors and end users alike. Because again, this is a community that's not just contributors, it's not just end users, it's both. So we really need to have that intersection between the two. And then finally, we have OTel in real life events. So this is the part, having the KubeCons, this stuff is awesome. KubeCon Europe, especially, I feel like it's super well attended by folks in the OTel community, and I think having the OTel Observatory in the last several KubeCons has been really, really helpful, because it's made it such a welcoming place for people to come, for maintainers to gather together, for end users to come in and ask questions. It's been really awesome. We've organized in-person SIG meetings, and then the other thing that we started 4 KubeCons ago, so starting in KubeCon Chicago, was the Humans of OTel interview series, where again it's all about making sure that like we're top of mind in the community, right? So the point of these interviews is for us to introduce the folks who are contributing to OTel, whether you're a maintainer, a contributor, approver, or even an end user, so that like there are people behind open source. It's not just like some random GitHub avatar that's like approving your pull requests or requesting for more feedback. There are real humans that make open source work, and without these people putting in the time, the effort, actually giving a crap about what's going on, this project wouldn't be where it is. So we really want to make sure that you connect with the folks who are part of this wonderful project. So with that, let's go over some strategies for helping you if you're building up your community. So first off, make sure you're responsive and transparent. I think one thing that's extremely successful about OpenTelemetry is the fact that folks are fairly responsive, fairly transparent, no one's mean. Even like the OTel End User SIG, a lot of people tend to post in our Slack channel questions, technical OTel-related questions. We don't necessarily have all the answers, but we can at least point them in the right direction, because I think nothing's worse than someone posting a question and then their question getting ignored, and they're like, well, this community sucks. I'm never gonna ask a question again. So we make it a point of, no matter what, someone answers that question, points them in the right direction. We want to make it easy for people to contribute, and I think we're getting there. We put out a blog post, I want to say last year, on how to contribute to OpenTelemetry, and now there's the contribution SIG, which is, I think, really going to help make it even easier for contribution. Making sure, I think one of the things that's helped us with our community is hosting events on a consistent basis. So like I said, even if we don't have something like OTel Me or OTel in Practice going on, making sure that we have something to remind our community, hey, we're still around, we still matter, we still care about you.
So improving production value where possible. This is what Adriana touched on briefly earlier, where we zhuzhed up. So instead of using Zoom, we use StreamYard now for our virtual events. And then even just doing something like, I use Canva. I'm a huge fan of Canva to create event graphics that are more eye-catching, because you're fighting with people's attention spans, right? There's so much going on. People have their day jobs. There's a million other things going on online. So if you are able to either do it yourself or have a creative resource you can reach out to, we definitely recommend doing so. And also keeping vendor neutrality as a top priority. Adriana mentioned this quite a bit. We work for competing observability vendors, but we don't ever feel like we're competing with each other. And I think that hopefully that trickles down into the events that we do and the people that attend. And of course, working around time zones, availability, that's still and always going to continue to be a bit of a struggle, right? But sometimes I'll come on late or come on super early so that someone else doesn't have to. But also keeping things at the same time that generally works for most people is another thing that I think has worked quite well.
I would say also the fact that now we have 3 proper maintainers in the SIG. We can cover for each other. So if it doesn't have to be that all three of us make the SIG meetings. We want to at least have critical mass of like 2 of the maintainers around to be able to like help steer things and answer questions. And it's been kind of cool actually in the last like month or 2. We've had like a lot of people join the SIG, which we're very excited about. And so there's a lot of enthusiasm. So now we're like dealing with a bit of a scaling issue, you know, oopsie, big problems for us. Like this is a good problem because it means that people care enough to be able to want to join the SIG, that they think that they can make a difference, which has been amazing. But that's something that we're, I think one of the challenges that we need to work around now is like, how do we make sure that we define the SIG priorities and make sure that we're all aligned to the SIG priorities? Because when it was like primarily the 3 of us, it was like pretty easy. But now as you have more people joining, like let's make sure we don't end up with like kingdom building, because that can be very, very easy to happen, right? Everyone's kind of got their own agenda. We want to make sure we have a unified agenda.
Yeah, more people joining, and then also building more resources as well. Oh shoot, there was something I was going to add, but I forget. And also, I think we're at time.
Well, so we'll leave you with some resources. First of all, OTel Community Day is coming up in at the end of June as part of Open Source Summit, co-located event kind of deal. We have a CNCF community page for OTel, so if you're interested in our OTel live stream events, they are published there. As I mentioned, I did write a blog post on how to contribute to OpenTelemetry, so I've got a link for that. We have a GitHub repo for the End User SIG, our YouTube channel, and of course our Slack channel on CNCF Slack. And then finally, I've got some shameless self-promotion to do. I have a podcast. My daughter, who's 16, helps to edit the videos, and she designed the stickers. It has a capybara. Remember, I like them. I do have stickers if anyone is interested. And I've had really awesome guests like Kelsey Hightower, Liz Fong-Jones. Reese was actually like my second guest. My first guest was my daughter. So extra reason to go check it out. Me interviewing a 15-year-old at the time, and then Reese, who has awesome stories. And then also, if you're new to OpenTelemetry, observability-like video courses, I have an O'Reilly video course on observability with OTel. Check it out if you have a subscription. And then big thanks to Reese's cat, Taco, who is like the best slide model ever. And every time I look through her slides, what Reese has done with the slides and putting Taco on, I'm like, it just brings a smile to my face. So this is why we keep doing the talks together.
Hopefully make the talks fun for everyone, especially, you know, this late on the second day of KubeCon.
At the end of the day, when everyone's tired and wants alcohol.
Yeah, and that's for the scaling, you know, the SIG thing. Stay tuned for 2.0 of our talk, maybe?
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for coming out. Hopefully you found this useful. Definitely reach out to us. We are at OTel-SIG-End-User on CNCF Slack.
Yes. And stick around. I want to take an audience selfie. So really quickly. Thank you. You've been awesome.